Good evening, everybody, and happy first night of Hanukkah. This week is Parshas Veyeishev, and Parshas Veyeishev introduces us to the relationship of Yosef and his other 11 brothers, the strained relationship between them. Yosef is the favorite child of his father, and the other 11 brothers are jealous. Yosef, to make matters worse, tells a dream to his brothers that he slept, and he said, in my dream, all 12 of us were in the field, and we were binding stalks of wheat together. And behold, your 11 stalks that you all represented, that you were all binding, rose up and bowed to my stalk of wheat. And obviously the brothers now felt even more jealous or more instigated by their brother Yosef, saying, oh, you think you're going to become our king? Now all of a sudden you're dreaming about rulership over us, and they hated him. Eventually, as we know, this dream came true. Yosef ended up getting sold down to slavery to Egypt. He stopped a famine from happening, and the whole world ended up depending on him. The brothers and their father had to leave Israel to go meet Yosef. They had to bow to him and to become subservient to the king and the viceroy of Egypt to get food. And that's how the beginning of exile, the Egyptian exile, began. So let's analyze this for a second. Torah is giving us a very specific dream to tell us about what going into exile, what leaving your ideal spiritual place and home and going into exile looks like. That is hinted to and alluded to in a dream about binding stalks of wheat and those stalks of wheat bowing to Yosef's stalk of wheat. So what lesson is Torah trying to give us to our lives while we find ourselves in exile, or our souls are really in exile in our bodies? What exactly is this lesson of us needing to engage exile or us in needing to engage not being in our place by the concept of binding stalks of wheat? It seems very random. Now, the explanation Chassidus gives to this is very powerful and very relevant in our times too. This is how it goes. Our world, by definition, is a very fractured and splintered world. That's what physicality is. We have 7 billion different people, all in 7 billion different lanes. I'm chasing my life, you're chasing your life. I see things this way, you see things that way. We're a bunch of different shapes, sizes, colors, etc. Climates in this part of the world are completely different than climates in that side of the world. There are billions of different types of animals, and that's just the reality of the physical world. It's a very splintered, fractured, multifaceted place where we could feel very lost and intimidated by seeing such division. Also in our own lives, our lives as being members, card-carrying members of this world, are also very splintered. We have family obligations, we have our hobbies and our interests and our jobs, and sometimes we just feel all over the place in this and falling apart in this very apart world. So our job as a Jew, the reason why our soul comes down here, or the Jewish job of bringing godliness to the world, is to really heal and mend this fracture and this divide. If spiritual physicality is only splintered because there's no center of the target that's pulling and harmonizing everything together. In an ideal world, we bring an awareness of godliness to this world, which makes everything just fit in cohesively to make sense. How, yes, we're all so divided, we're all so different, but we're all here to serve a common goal. And therefore there's room for you, there's room for me, and we all start being bundled and harmonized together. This is the concept of life. This is what we're doing down here. We are here to make bundles of wheat, separate stalks of wheat that seem so separated, and to start binding and unifying them in the world around us and in ourselves, to start finding meaning, our neshama, our calling in our life, around which all of our splintered and separated obligations revolve around, and we could feel anchored in that soul and not just splintered and falling apart. However, in this binding of the stalks of wheat, there's 2 ways of binding. One stage of binding is the stalks of wheat, separated stalks of wheat that are in the field. I just technically hold them together and bind them together. That would represent not unifying stalks of wheat, but keeping them not separate. Then there's the concept of actively unifying. I'll spell this out in life and then we'll bring it back to the dream. Does unity between people mean that we stop fighting and that we get along? That is a very superficial baseline level of unity. Unity doesn't just mean that we're all different and just we're not fighting with each other. That just means fundamentally we're still fractured. Maybe we're not fighting and that fracture isn't coming to the isn't erupting with bigger earthquakes. But it means me and you are very different. We don't necessarily have common ground. We have enough that we know that it's worth our while not to fight. That's not called real unity. That's just called taking stalks in the field and binding them together in the field. Real unity is when you take those stalks, bring them home, and bake bread with them, turn them into a real entity, that they become worthy of human consumption. Or when you take the stalks, you raise them up and bow them towards something true. Bow them towards Yosef, which is a transcendent truth. Real unity doesn't just mean we get along. Real unity means we start becoming aware of what our world is really based on, and we start leaning into that together and to serve that together. Unity is not a negative. Unity doesn't mean not fighting. Unity means something proactive called unity, called finding the center of our world, finding what's true, finding the ultimate truth, and how we could all lean in and serve that ultimate truth from our differences. Our differences now become an asset and become different colors in the beautiful painting of this world. This holds true also in anyone's individual life. Again, we are splintered, anxious, all over the place people. And we know there's Torah, spirituality, Chassidus heals us. We also know that there's modern day psychology. And it's always an interesting discussion to discuss what are the differences between psychology and the way psychology heals people and the way Torah and Chassidus heals people. And the difference perhaps is what we were just discussing. Psychology ultimately will never fully heal a Jew. Psychology is dealing with a broken person, or deals with a broken person, someone who's fractured and splintered, and to start gluing those pieces back together. But again, that doesn't mean that this person has become unified and wholesome. That means this person has become non-splintered. He's still in the field. What is my life about? He might not be able to answer. How to be able to cope with certain traumas, how to be able to not feel overly anxious, not feel paralyzed by anxiety or depression. Maybe he'll have good tools for that. So he's not splintered, but that does not yet mean he's unified. A person, a soul, a Jew, cannot feel complete by just taking his pieces and technically putting them together. He needs those pieces to rise up and serve a purpose. A person's not here to put his pieces together, but he's here to give those pieces over to something greater than himself. There's a famous psychologist named Abraham Maslow who made a hierarchy of needs of people. Right? We need food, water, we need connection, etc. I think he has 5 or 6 different steps. Ultimately, when he was younger, he said, what's our ultimate need in life is self-actualization, to be able to just be our best selves, to be, to actualize ourselves and our talents. But then later in life, he said that's not he changed his theory, and he said that's not our ultimate need. Our ultimate need is self-transcendence, to go above ourselves. Not just to be ourselves, but to take ourselves, to lift them up to something higher and to bow them in. And that's something that Torah and Chassidus offers us. It offers us to become whole, not by taking our broken pieces and putting them together, but by actually introducing us to wholesomeness, by actually introducing us to our soul. This is obviously very connected to Hanukkah. Hanukkah is the Yom Tov of the flame, the candle. And as Tanya tells us, that's what the Jewish soul is. The Jewish soul is like a candle that's not just looking to shine its light. The candle is constantly flickering to go back to its source, even if it's going to be nullified over there. A Jew, deep down, needs nullification towards God. He doesn't just need splintering his pieces back together. He doesn't just need binding his fractured self. He needs to be able to take that self when put together, when obviously with stable grounding, and to be able to try to almost annihilate that, to transcend that self that he has put together, and to bow that towards Yosef, to bow that towards something that's very true, real, and meaningful. And only then can a Jew feel wholesome and fully radiant and alive. Have a great Shabbos, and again, Happy Hanukkah.